So in this module, we will learn what is Azure Active Directory and why we will require it. Okay. So how it is comes into the frame. Okay. So let's go to the paint. Another one. So in previously, Sandeep, when we don't have the Active Directory, first we need to learn what is Active Directory. Okay. Suppose we don't have the Active Directory, then how can we work? Okay, suppose you are working as a system administrator, and in your company there is no Active Directory. So when a new employee comes to the company and you assign a laptop to it, okay, so it's required, uh, you create a new username and the password for the particular laptop, so they can log in into the laptop. So it is called only the local authentication. Means users use the local username and the local password to log in into the laptop. Okay, so they use the local authentication. Okay, suppose in your in your company there is a small company, so it is it is 10 number of computers in that. So for the 10 numbers, you can manage the username and the password locally. Okay, so you write a notepad in a notepad file and you can manage that. Okay, suppose the number of the users is increased by hundreds. So how can you remember each and everyone passwords and all? Okay, suppose this computer has hundreds of the thing. So how can you manage that? Okay, also if a user forget their password, suppose if a user forget that username and password, okay, then how can you recover that? So you have to uh, provide uh, you have to log in as a system administrator or the root account, so then you can only able to reset it. Okay, suppose your user is suppose your user is go with a go at a remote location and he have a important meeting. Okay, now he forget your username and password, then how can you reset that? Okay, so there is two way to reset. Okay, once you have to provide a root user account credential for that, then he only able to uh, provide remote session to you, and then you can only able to reset the passwords. Okay, and this is more critical thing to provide the root account to your normal users. So it's a big failure between you and the users to provide the root account, root user accounts. Okay, so if there is only 20 to 50 persons in your company, you can manage it by locally. Suppose if your in your company there is 1,000 or the 2,000 people, then how can you manage? It is very complicated to manage all the passwords and user also log in into the across devices. Suppose in your company, suppose this is your company and there is there is uh, 50s of the system, 50 of the customers, 50 of the computers is here. Okay, and people are working into the shifts. Okay, then if AD is not there, Active Directory is not there, or domain group domain services is not there. Okay, then you have to create a particular user, create a particular user on every system. So you will be create or not. Suppose there is 50 users and in 50 users we have 50 systems. 50 virtual CPUs, sorry, 50 CPUs. Sandeep, you will be create the 50 users to each computer or not?
Yes, we need to create it. If you won't create, it won't work actually.
So as per your, you have to create the 50 users.
If it is a local means work group model, we need to create. If it's from
Okay,
area, not required.
yes, work group model, we have to create the 50 users on every each and every system. Okay, suppose there is one application into the HR team, so we have to log in on into that. Okay, so for the 50 user, we have to create separate credential for each and everyone. Okay, and suppose in our company there is a 10 application. Suppose there is a 10 application in our company, then again we have to uh, create separate user on each and every web application, like 50 user on this application, 50 user on this application, 50 user on this application, and 50 user on this application. So it is very complicated. Okay, so we have in previously we have to create each and every username for each and every applications. Okay, now Active Directory comes into the frame. Okay, it's provide only a single sign-in solution. Active Directory comes into the frame. It's provide single sign-in solution. Let me show you. Give me a minute. Let me show you. So when Active Directory comes, okay, when Active Directory comes, so you don't have to create. Suppose let me uh, erase it. Okay, so when Active Directory comes, okay, into the market, it's announced into the 2000 by the Microsoft Azure. Sorry, Microsoft only. Okay, once Active Directory, suppose there is a server and you install a Active Directory here like DC Pro, Windows Server, and install a Active Directory on it. Okay, so once you install the Active Directory on it, you have to create users only a single time. Okay, suppose and you have to join the domain. You have to uh, your machine needs to be join the domain so they can authenticate from your Active Directory. Okay, so suppose there is 50s of machines. Let me create it first. So there is 50s of machines. People are working into the shifts. Okay, so we have to uh, once join all the machines to the Active Directory domains. So this is now called as a domain controller. This is now act as a domain controller, and once you join all the machine to the particular domain, okay, and when any users when any user try to log in into your system, so they can authenticate. Active Directory can authenticate, and Active Directory can see the database of that particular user, that this user is existing to your uh, in your Active Directory or not, or what the permission they have. So they can easily authenticate through the single sign-on method. Okay, so we don't need to create each and every time for a single application. Okay, suppose we create an application after the Azure Active Directory. Okay, we can directly implement the Active Directory into it, so people can use directly through the Active Directory authentication. Web app. Suppose this is the web app one for the HR for the login. Okay, so the web app one does not require a different username or password for, or the separate username password for the login. People can log in directly to the panel. Suppose here is the URL like hr.com. People just open the hr.com URL and you integrate this panel to the Azure Active Directory, so they can directly log in with that particular web URL and authenticate via Azure, authenticate via Active Directory. Okay, so now this is the model of a Azure Active, only the Active Directory. But what does Azure Active Directory? Okay, let's go to the paint. Now comes into the, this is only a Active Directory. Active Directory. Now go to the Azure Active Directory. Okay, so Azure Active Directory is Microsoft cloud-based identity and access management service, which helps your employee to sign in and access resources. In the simple form, in Microsoft Cloud, it is a Microsoft cloud-based identity and access management services, which helps you to employ sign in, access resources. Okay, so what are the resources? Means your means your external resources. Okay, external resources means your Office 365, OS 365. Okay, your Azure portal and SaaS application. Okay, and the internal resources means your application which is running into your internal networking or access the workstation on premises. Okay, to access your on premises. Okay, by this Active Directory, Azure Active Directory, you can also say this, it is a single sign-on, SSO. It's provide a single sign-on. SSO means the single sign-on. Okay, and it's come into the Azure Active Directory comes into the 4 edition. First is free, MFA, SSO, and security base. Let me write it. All the fours comes into the 4 edition. First is free. The full name is free MFA, SSO, single sign on, and the comes with the basic security. Comes with the basic security and usage report. Okay, and the another one is Active Directory comes into the 4 edition. First is this, and second one is Office 365 apps. I will show you into the Azure panel this as well. Okay, so it's used for the company branding, and service software level agreement SLA, and to sync between on premises and cloud. Okay, and the third one is premium one, and second one is premium 2. So we can see all the differences into the panel. Premium one is used for the hybrid architecture. Hybrid architecture and advanced group access. And premium 2 is used for the identity protection. And also used for the governance. Okay, so these are the 4 editions comes with the Azure Active Directory. And another one is, what is the use case? Use case, so you can authenticate, uh, authorize or authenticate to multiple resources. Suppose if you implement the Azure Active Directory, suppose this is your Azure Active Directory, and you can implement it to the, you can use AD Connect to implement your on-premises Active Directory. Suppose in your on-premises you have a working Active Directory into your on-premises, you can connect with that through the AD Connect feature. AD Connect provide connectivity between your on-premises and Azure Active Directory. Okay, you can use Active Directory for the web application, web app login, or you can also use it for the external identities like Facebook, Google's. Google login. Okay, and also use for the cloud application. Cloud application means your Office 365, your Azure account, or the other O365 and Azure portal. Okay, so we can authenticate and authorize user to connect between these type of resources. Okay, so So Azure AD can authorize and authenticate to multiple sources, like to your on-premises AD and to your web application login. Allow user to log in with their uh, Facebook or the login ID also. And it's also provide Office 365 and Microsoft Azure network through the AD. Got it, Sandeep and Ghosh? Is it clear? Hello. So did you understand this? Azure Active.
Yes, yes, yes.
So Azure Active Directory and its use cases. Okay.
Okay.
So let's talk about what is the difference between AD and uh, let's talk about what is the difference between AD and versus Active Directory versus Azure AD. Azure AD means Azure Active Directory. Okay. Yes, Sandeep is joining. Okay. So Microsoft introduced Active Directory domain services in Windows 2000. Okay, in Windows 2000 to give organization the ability to manage multiple on-premises infrastructure component and system using a single identity per user. So it's provide single identity. It's launched into the in Windows 2000 to provide single sign-in. Single sign or single identity per user. Okay, and also Azure AD. Azure AD is an advantage of the Active Directory. Okay, take this approach to the next level by providing organization with an identity as a service. So it's provide IDAAS, IDAAS, and IDAAS means a identity as a service solution for their application. Means you can integrate Azure Active Directory to your web application or to your uh, any mobile application or any type of application for the authentication. Okay, so it's across the platform, like it's across the platform. You can use it on premises, you can use into the application, you can use it into the within the network. Okay, so both version are still used today. You can use Azure AD across the cloud and also the on premises. So this is the difference between the Active Directory and Azure AD. You can do the same work into the Azure AD. Also, you can migrate your Active Directory on premises Active Directory to the Azure Active Directory. You can also migrate. Okay, so let's uh, see the terminology of the Active Directory. Okay, so let's me clear. Sorry, let me open it once again. Okay, so in the terminology of Active Directory, we have let me write it. So we have a domain. Okay. Domain. A domain is an area of network organized by the single authentication database. Suppose once we create a user account onto the Azure panel, okay. So by default, a domain is created here. As you can see on my panel, let me go to the Azure panel. And if I go through the Active Directory, Azure Active Directory, you can see default directory is created and also the domain is also created. You can see. Yeah, you can see the primary domain name. So once you sign in onto the Azure panel, once you sign in into the Azure panel, a domain is created by default with your username and .microsoft on microsoft.com. Okay. So primary domain is here. Domain controller. Once is uh, first component is domain and another one is domain controller. Domain controller means the DC. DC. A domain controller is a server that authenticate user identities and authorize their access to the resource. Okay. Domain computer. Another one is domain computer. Domain computer, a computer that is registered with the central database. Suppose, let me write the diagram over here. Okay. So this is your domain. This is your domain. In your domain, we have a domain controller. Suppose the main computer or the server. Okay. And this is called the DC. DC means the domain controller, and domain computer. Domain computer means the normal user. Okay, means the normal user. It's called the domain computers. Okay, so domain computer that is registered with the central authenticate databases. Central authenticate databases means the domain controller. Okay, a domain controller, sorry, domain computer would be an AD objects. So this is an AD object, means the Active Directory objects. AD object, AD objects means the, what is the AD object? AD objects means your devices, your devices, your computers, your share folder and printers. So I'm talking only about the on premises right now. Okay, share folder and the printers. So you can assign as per the AD objects to a particular system. That means this person can use the print services on across the AD, or they can print the or the share the folders. Okay. And another one is GPO. GPO means the group policy object. Okay, a virtual collection of policy settings. It's control what AD object have to access. Means you can create a logical group. A logical group means suppose we have a team is here, like this is the testing team. Okay, and here is the developer team. Okay, so we can create the logical boundaries to each and every group through the group policy object. Okay, so we can create the this group have another access and this group have another access. So we can create the logical boundaries to each and every one group. Okay, we can join into a group or we can join as per the requirement. Organization unit. Organization unit means a subdivision with in an Active Directory into which you can place users, computers, or the groups and other organization units. Okay. Directory service such as Active Directory Domain Services means ADDS. We can say is ADDS service. ADDS, Active Directory Domain Services, provide the method for storing directory data and make this data available to the network users and administrators. A directory services runs on the domain controller, means this services runs on the domain controller. Okay, so they can store the data and make it accessible to the users and the administrators, and also for the groups, and work according to the policies. Got it? Is it clear, Sandeep and Mai?
Yes, Akshay.
Okay, so let's overview all the things. What about the AD and all? Okay, so we use Active Directory for the authentication purposes. It's provide a single identity per user. Okay, and it's help you to uh, it's help your employees to sign in on a panel or access resources. Okay, in the other slides we can see you can use the Active Directory to multiple platform like your on premises, your web application, your FB login, and the Azure other portal. Azure portal or the Office 365. You can implement Azure Active Directory to any application. Okay, and what is the difference between that? Differences, it is launched into the Windows 2000 to provide single identity per user, and Azure Active Directory is a cloud-based version. Both are still exist. You can easily migrate your on-premises Active Directory to the Azure Active Directory. Okay, let's go to the other. So for the terminology, recently we discussed what is the terminology, like a domain. A domain, where are you working, or a company, it's called a domain. Okay, and domain controller means your server. Domain computer means your users. Object means your devices, computers, and share folder, printers, and the other. Okay, all the devices connected between the AD, it's called a object. AD objects. GPU GPO means the group policy object, means you can create a logical boundary to each and every group, so they can use a particular services. Okay, organization unit means a subdivision within a Active Directory into which you can place users, computer, and the other organization unit, so you can use the service. And directory service means ADDS, Active Directory Domain Services. It run on the domain controller. It's provide a method to store data and making this data available to the network users and system administrator. A directory services runs on the domain controller. Got it? And let's go to the Azure account. Okay, so AD tenants. What is AD tenants? Okay, so tenant, what is the tenant? Okay, tenant means a tenant represent an organization in Azure Active Directory. Okay, tenant is dedicated Azure AD services instance, means once you log in into the Azure panel, you must have a tenant. You by default, a tenant means When you log in into the Azure or Microsoft services, by default a tenant is created. Okay, you can see directory name, default directory. You can say the directory or the tenant are the same. Okay, tenant ID is this. Okay, and once you log in with the your ID, it will create a primary domain. Okay, so you can see yxa46@gmail.com is my email ID, and it's create a primary domain license. You can see the licenses here, Azure AD free. Right now I have free license. Okay, a tenant is automatically created when you sign up for either, like if you log in into the Microsoft Azure, if you log in into the Microsoft Intune, if you log in into the Microsoft 365. Okay, each Azure AD tenant is separate from other AD tenants. Okay, so it is separate from each and every tenants. Got it? In tomorrow, we will see how to create tenant, what is users, what is use groups, what is external identities, and what is roles and administration. We can assign the roles here, and we can create. So you can see these are the roles which we can assign to the particular users for that to perform the actions. External identities, we can create the external identities. Let's go to the default. We can create users here. Okay, so this is the default user for my account which I have logged in. If I create on the new users, so we can create new user but the same domain. Okay, so we will create tomorrow the users and the groups, the guest users and all. We will more deep dive into the Azure AD tomorrow at morning. Okay, is it clear to you? Any question
Yes, actually.
related to the AD?
Is this Azure actually used in current market currently, or going on it will be used?
Sorry, I did not get you. Can you please speak loudly?
Organizations are using this Azure Active Directory, yeah?
Okay.
Or in real time, companies using this Azure AD, or still they are using their on-prem AD only? I don't think they are.
So, company, if a company works on the Microsoft, so it is definitely use the Azure AD services to provide the single sign-in or to provide resources. Okay. Suppose Sandeep is working at my company as a developer. So if I want to give access to a particular resources, I can assign I can assign Sandeep as a user into my AD, and Sandeep can directly access the resources. Got it? Is it clear?
Yeah, yes, clear.
Okay, so in tomorrow we will see how to create groups, what is the different between the permission types and all. Okay. Any other question, Mahi and Sandeep?
No.
Okay, so can we leave now?
No.
Okay, thank you.